Hello, everybody. We're going to get this thing started, and we gotta do it today because I ain't doing it tomorrow. All right, we're gonna do our pop culture live stream today, and this is our first live stream of March 2024. We're gonna talk about anime today instead of talking about um, anything else. Usually, I berated everybody with politics for the entire month of February, so I'm going to try to give that a break. And we're gonna go back to talking about fun stuff. Um, so I watched some anime. I watched all of Dragon Ball Daima. Um, I watched Frieren. Of course, I watched Dan to Dan. I'm caught up on that, and uh, that's about it when it comes to different anime that I've been watching. So I want to talk about these things. WG Phil says he's sorry to hear about my bad mood. Hey, look, I hope Elimination Chamber fixes it. I don't think so. I don't think it will, but we're gonna give it a shot. Um, my boy Young Search, he invited me to go down to his house to watch the show. I don't think I'm gonna make it. You know, I don't think I'm gonna make it. But because I'm probably gonna do this show right up until 6:50 or something like that, maybe about 50 minutes, and then you know, hopefully my food will be here by that time, and then I can go and get ready to watch Elimination Chamber with my brother. Also, AJ3, hello. So, we're going to talk about Dragon Ball Daima first, the legacy of Akira Toriyama. It's been running since October, one episode per week, 20 episodes in the entire series. I got 5 positives and 5 negatives um, about the show that I want to discuss. And then we'll talk about uh, Frieren Beyond Journey's End, which I watched. And then we'll probably talk about Dan to Dan, which I also watched. So Dragon Ball Daima um, is Elimination Chamber live. It, every WWE pay per view is live. What do you mean? I don't understand. I might go down to Young Sir's house for like one of the nights of WrestleMania, like I did last year. So I got 5 negatives and 5 positives for Dragon Ball Daima. Um, I'm going to assume everybody watched it. I'm going to assume that everybody who was going to watch Dragon Ball Daima was going to watch it. And I can tell you it was kind of a disappointing finale because it wasn't spoiled. Um, there were things that actually occurred. Oh no, it don't start till 7. It'll start at 7. Um, so it'll be tough, but it'll start at 7. Oh, okay, he's in Canada. Oh, okay, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what time it is in Canada, my guy. But I know it starts at 7 on Peacock here in the good old United States. Um, so there will be that. All right. So I really got more than 5 negatives for Dragon Ball Daima because some of the positives are even negatives. But let's talk about some of the negatives to the show. I think the number one problem with the program, the same issue with Dragon Ball Super near the end, is that the villains aren't really all that evil. Um, Goma, Degetsu, Arinsu, none of them are truly evil villains. Like the show did not like when you look at Frieza, Boo, Cell. I mean, these were guys going around putting holes in people, destroying planets, eating folks, just all kinds of really sick, twisted stuff. Goma did not do any of that. He spent most of the show in his chamber or whatever, yelling at Degetsu. That was pretty much it. He was a comedic creature. And to me, that did a lot of damage to the show because a lot of the threat level has been modified. All of the villains with this, I mean, even the Tamagami turned out to not really be villains. Um, and that was an issue for me. I think that if it's on now, I think this the kickoff show that's on now for Elimination Chamber. I don't think the actual show has started yet. I saw that the show starts at 7, so I don't know. I know the kickoff show has probably started by now. Let's take a look first, because I'm pretty sure it's the kickoff show still on now. Yeah, it's the kickoff show is on now. The actual show starts at 7. All right. So, like I said, the threat level was very low, which means that the stakes were very low. They introduced a bunch of new characters, Majin Du, Majin Ku, the Tamagamis, Neva, Glorio, Pansy. None of these were real villains. To me, it just seems like they did not want to commit to going back to Dragon Ball's roots. They wanted it to be a family-friendly franchise, and that leads to my second issue, which was the childish characterization of Goku, especially in the early part of the series. The fart jokes, being generally weird, not taking showers and stuff like that's just stuff that kind of goes against the character. Which it would have made sense if we were talking about Mountain Boy Goku at the beginning of Dragon Ball, but this is 40-some-odd-year-old Goku here. It's a little weird. And I was like, I wasn't a big fan of that, So I didn't really like Goku's characterization. But my biggest problem was definitely the lack of heat. The lack of you introduced all these villains, all these characters, especially like Majin Du and Majin Buu, and these ended up being goofball characters. Goma and Degus. I mean, Degasu got defeated with a chop, just a single chop, and that was it. It's goofball character, no power level at all, no threat level at all. They kidnapped Dende, but they didn't do anything to him. They were going to raise him, which is, I guess that's fine. They didn't expect, the gang to storm the demon world, but that was a problem. The third and probably one of the biggest issues for me also is that the plot was entirely too slow. Episode 1 was very solid, and then 2 through probably 17 super slow. They can't fly, so they have to use these planes, but the planes keep getting stolen. They keep breaking down, which of course drags the plot even more. I that was such a huge problem. That was one of the biggest frustrations for me. Is I held out hope that Goma would be a legitimate threat, or that there would be a double cross that would be a legitimate threat. But I was completely burned out with the lack of movement. Like the story being constipated for week after week after week for like 5 or 6 weeks was absolutely terrible. You know, and it was awful. I got to tell you. That made it very hard to get through. If I was binging the show, it would still be a problem. That's how bad it was. If I was, trade waiting, or just waiting for the entire show to run through and then watching it all the way through, it would still be a problem. It just felt like filler, 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 filler. Oh shit, something happened. Filler, filler, filler. Oh shit, something happened. It's like I can't stand it. It was terrible. That leads to the next thing, which is the very bizarre power scaling of the show. Goku and Vegeta struggling against this Kraken thing. They can't beat up guys with laser guns. They're struggling against these giant creatures, these giant teddy bears or something like that. Nah, come on, man. I get it. You should have just depowered them completely. If they had been turned literally into children, which would have mean that they had no access to their higher forms of power and all that kind of stuff, then yeah, it would have been more interesting to see them struggle against the Kraken and stuff like this. But they have access to all of their powers, they're just in smaller bodies. It really made it pointless to see these guys struggling with the gendarmerie, these police officers who have guns. And it's one of those. It's a continuous Toriyama thing with Goku getting shot for some reason. It was. I don't know. I get it. You want to show that Goku is not unbeatable and there's always something, but this is ridiculous for me. I was completely taken out during that episode where Goku and Piccolo and Vegeta couldn't just wash some guys with guns. So, that sucked. Mm. And I was disappointed in that. That actually added to some of the filler the filler, elements of it. And because they didn't introduce those with the rip-offs, the kind of the nod to I was about to call it the Spirit Squad, Jesus Christ, the Ginyu Force. And those guys, they went through they got a lot of screen time on Daima. And they were pointless. They ended up getting beat almost immediately. And that was the dumbest shit in the world. It was truly stupid. So I was definitely disappointed in that. So far we got, the villains are not as evil as they should be. Not a big fan of the Goku's characterization. Not really a big fan of the plot, how slow it was. Even the idea of turning them into children, I think, was fine. I just did not like how slow the plot was. The broken power scaling and the crazy retcons. The retcons, usually I don't trip about retcons simply because when you're continuing a series that was supposed to be complete or that is, technically never ends, there's going to be retcons. It's just inevitable. Try writing a Spider-Man comic from issue number 1 for a decade without retroactive continuity. You're going to retcon something. It's just inevitable. As a writer, you're going to see something and you say, well, I'm going to bring this character back that I supposedly killed. I'm going to bring them back. Or there is this item or something like that I created that I'm going to bring it back. Or a storyline that I completed that I want to pick back up. It's just an easy way for writers to continue doing what they're doing. Is that there's going to be retcons. As long as the major points of the series are not changed, then it should be fine. Of course, by introducing Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, Super Saiyan 4 Goku, of course you beg the question, why that stuff not in Super? So that leaves a lot of people saying, all right, this is supposed to be connective tissue between Z and Super, but then you introduce stuff in this series that it don't appear in Super. You introduce characters that did not participate in any of the tournaments that was taking place. What was that called? The extinction level tournament or whatever. They was destroying planets. Nobody from the Demon World was there. Then you have Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, which he did not have access to at the beginning of Super, and none of the movies either. Super Saiyan 3 Goku was introduced as sort of a magic power up for Goku, and that would have made sense, if it was this is something that he can do because of Neva's magic, and I thought that would have been great. It would have been a good way to explain why he couldn't do it again. And then when they regained their bodies, he was able to just transform at will, and that made me want to puke because now you have to explain why he couldn't do this in Super, you know? So it's just, we know Toriyama. We do know Toriyama. Toriyama doesn't overthink things. He tries to make the fans happy, and generally the fans are happy. He wanted to have his own little version of Super Saiyan 4, so he did it. I'm cool with that. I just think that it does mean that there's going to be timey-wimey stuff, and much like the movies not being canon, I don't want to get too deep into this, but just like the movies aren't canon, DAIMA can't be canon because DAIMA actually overrides some of the stuff that's in Super. So you can't have these two things coexist at the same time without an explanation about why Vegeta can't use Super Saiyan 3. Why can't Goku just transform into a Super Saiyan 4? These things cannot be explained in Super, and even in the manga, because the manga is already ongoing. They're already deep into the manga. The only thing you can do now is probably have these guys transform during the series at some point, I guess. And that's when you just kind of got they operate in different pockets. So it's basically multiverse shit, like what AJ3 said here, that it's just multiverse stuff. It's an alternate take on Dragon Ball from a different time. But Daima was an opportunity for Toriyama to bring in a little bit of everything. You know, he wanted to have bits of Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z, Super, and Daima, and bring in something new at the same time. That was the point of Dragon Ball Daima. It wasn't the point wasn't for it to enhance Super. The point was to do a love letter to Dragon Ball with a whole new story. So that's why you have Pansy, who is basically like the Demon World version of Bulma. Um, and you had a lot of gags and jokes and stuff like that in it. It's very Dragon Ball-ish. But you're in a position now where everybody tries to make everything one long story, and you can't do that because they keep doing stuff, you know, that counteracts other parts of the story. So Daima is going to have to exist in a pocket universe, much like GT. There's just nothing you could do about it because it overrides Super, and Super was one of the last things that Toriyama worked on outside of Daima. So much like Broly had to get retconned into Super, they're going to have to find some way to retcon Super Saiyan 4 into Super in order for it to make sense, for Super to make sense, I should say. The Demon World is also going to have to get rolled into Super in order for that to make sense. And that just gives Taro a lot to play with in terms of fodder for the manga. He could create now that he doesn't have Toriyama there, he can create new villains, he can create new ideas, he can expand on all of these different things that already exist. So get prepared for like Super Saiyan 4 Ultra Instinct Goku. It's probably going to end up happening. You know, WG Phil says, wasn't it established Super Vegeta said Super Saiyan 3 was a waste of energy? Yeah, it was. And that's why I didn't understand why they decided to go beyond that to 4. You know, like, I just didn't see the purpose because it's like if 3 is a big waste of energy, then how is 4 not a big waste of energy? You know, when it changes your entire body, it would have made sense if it was magic that, you know, helped the transformation or whatever. But they decided not to go that route. They decided to say, oh, Goku worked for it. Okay, sure. All right. Kind of an ass pull, but okay, whatever. But I didn't really trip on the retcons too much. You know, the Glens being born from trees, so they're not born deities; they're picked, much like elected officials. You know, that's fine. So they're not born gods; they're born like regular Glens, and then they're, you know, given position across the universe. That didn't bother me. The dynamics being from the demon world, them being demons again, from being demons to aliens. They tried to make sense of that by saying the dynamics left the demon world so long ago that, you know, but then they had Piccolo have knowledge that he shouldn't have about, you know, things that he shouldn't have knowledge of. And you're like, okay, all right, Kami doesn't know this stuff, but somehow Piccolo does. And Nail is younger than Piccolo and Kami, and yet he knows. That doesn't make sense. So that was a problem, but at least the Namekian thing ties into the original Dragon Ball, where Demon King Piccolo was literally a demon. So that kind of fits. And Um, the Supreme Kai's real name. I don't look at that like it's a retcon either. It's more of a revelation. You know, they found out what his real name is because they're not supposed to address him by his real name anyway. You would assume the Supreme Kai is a title. You know, like you don't call this guy by his real name. You call him by his title. You address him in a very specific way. So now we know what his actual name is, even though it's never been used before. Um, so the retcons, they're not bad if you try to explain them, even if you explain them weakly. But that was a big problem. This was kind of an addition because I wrote the 5 negatives I had before I finished the episode. And then at the end, of course, you figure out they introduced a join bug, which is supposed to lead to fusion, and then they dropped it. So there was no fusion. Um, yeah, but it was pretty apparent that Shin was a fake name. You know, like that was pretty obvious. I think it was pretty obvious from the beginning that Shin wasn't his real name. That's just what he wanted to be called. Much like when Piccolo was going by Ma Junior, like that was just a alias. Like I'm just pretty sure that him being called Shin wasn't really his name. It was basically just like how they know him. They have to address him as something outside of Supreme Kai, so they called him Shin. But his family actually knows him as Nahare, which is fine. Uh, it's more of a revelation than a retcon, even though it's kind of both. Yes, we can also talk about the retcon of the Supreme Kai and Kibito being separate, and then them joining back together for Super just to be separated again. The fact that Majin Buu was turned into a child. How could there be a child version of Majin Buu? That doesn't make sense. Uh, like Buu is a creature. How could that being turned into a child thing even affect him? Whatever. No Gohan. I swore I thought Gohan was going to pop up in the middle of this thing, and that we was going to find out that it didn't affect him or something like that. But no, there was no Gohan whatsoever. I'm not really tripping. I'm a Gohan fan, but I'm not really tripping on there being no Gohan. Just kind of disappointing that there was no Gohan. Now, let's talk about some of the positives. Um, Number one, it was absolutely phenomenal animation. It was beautiful, beautifully crafted fight scenes, especially the final fight between Goma and Goku was gorgeous. The fights with the Tamagamis were phenomenal. I mean, once they really started getting into the fight, that's really what I think DAIMA should have been. That's what they missed out on. If they had really dug into the fights throughout the entirety of the series, the fact that it was short wouldn't have mattered. The fact that the villains were not as dangerous wouldn't have mattered. But the fights were compact. A part of what people really like about Dragon Balls was the long the long prolonged fights, right? But now we're not dealing with filler anymore in Dragon Ball Z. You're going with the, you know, basic half the episode is a fight, and that's pretty much it. And it's like, okay, that's not exactly what I would prefer, but you have to tamp down your expectations to a degree. But the animation was phenomenal. It was beautiful from beginning to end, unlike Super, which was trash for like the first, I don't know, 20 episodes or so. The second was the best thing about this stuff was the lore expansion. Learning more about the Glens, learning more about the Namex, the more about the multiverse, how it came to be, how the demon world fits into that. All of that was fun stuff. I always like lore expansion. I didn't like that the lore was expanded by them standing around talking. Usually, if you're going to expand some lore, it should be in a timely setting. But them just standing around talking about how this thing came to be and where this stuff comes from and all this kind of shit, that's fun. And it gives again Toyotaro and the fans more to play with in terms of where more characters can come from and how things operate. Um, it does kind of jingle up the hierarchy a little bit. like, the Grand Priest and all of them. Like, how does these Supreme Demon Kings fit into their hierarchy and all that kind of stuff? But that's something you can fix later. It's unfortunately not something that Toriyama's going to be able to have a hand in, considering he's passed away. I do like Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta and Super Saiyan 4 Goku being brought into the story. These are, of course, retcons, like I said before. But I'm okay with it because these were things that fans wanted to see. I'm okay with a little bit of fan service. The fan service, as long as it makes sense and it's logical, I'm cool with it. It makes sense that Vegeta would have eventually reached Super Saiyan 3, which is why it was foolish in Super for him to not have it. Like it was already dumb. But it'd have been one thing for him to say he can do it, he just chooses not to, which is not implied anywhere in Super. But it would have made sense. But Super Saiyan 4, of course, also would have made sense if it was done with magic. I also was a big fan of the Tamagamis. I like the idea of the Dragon Balls having a guardian, which is, of course, something that he borrowed from GT. Except for the Tamagamis were a lot cooler than those damn dragons, except for Omega Shenron, which was badass. But a lot of those dragons in GT were kind of whack. The Tamagamis were actually cool. Now, them not being malicious, but kind of being neutral, as they just kind of stand there and guard the Dragon Ball. I would have liked for at least one or two of the Tamagamis to be villains, or for them to be demonists. But Toriyama was being he used the word demon pretty loosely, because these people were not real demons. Okay, were not real demons. WG Phil says, to be fair, in Super, only Super Saiyan 1 and 2 were used. They had God power, so they wouldn't make sense to use 3 and 4. Maybe, but you still had these guys were fighting for their lives against Beerus, and they didn't know that Beerus was not going to destroy their planet. For them to not go all out was kind of stupid, if you ask me. And then considering these were things that already existed, it's hard for me to say that these things wouldn't have worked. I would have preferred if these things were magic related. That way you can explain why they didn't have it later. That, Neva used his magic to make Vegeta stronger. And then he used his magic to make Goku stronger. Because you saw him do it with the Tamagamis. To see him be able to do it with Saiyan characters, and then also play with that in terms of how the old Kai, the old witch Kai, had made Gohan stronger. That would make sense. It would be logical. Of course, when Gohan's power got reawakened, they started toggling that where it became a transformation when it shouldn't have been. It should have just been something that he was, rather than a power he had to tap into, which of course is lack of consistency, which is typical in Dragon Ball. But ultimately, I liked Super Saiyan 3 and Super Saiyan 4. Both of them crashed the internet. I thought that was pretty cool. I loved the evil third eye as an item. I thought it was a great MacGuffin. I wish the bulk of the plot should have been Goma searching for the evil third eye. If he was doing terrible things to people, having people eaten, having people killed, all this kind of stuff, because he was in search of the evil third eye after botching it, and saying, oh my goodness, I turned them into children rather than just wishing for the eye. Now I have to actually go and look for it, and then him sending his guys to go and to search all the demon worlds looking for the eye. And then you could have, brought in some of the more dangerous villains and stuff like that for Goku and these guys to fight, to keep away this third eye, or for them to find it before Goma finds it, or whatever the case may be. Probably would have been a better plot. But I liked it. The power up was tremendous. I mean, we went from Goma, who could we didn't know what he could do initially. So for him to be able to go toe to toe with Super Saiyan 3 and 4 and still be alive, even though he got a gigantic hole pulling his stomach, which was crazy power scaling though, because Goku blasted through 3 planets, right? Like that's nuts. Like he crash the sky in one of these planets, that's next level shit right there. But I like the third eye, but I did not like the final gag at the end. A lot of people think that it's classic Toriyama, and that's true, it is, but I didn't like it. And what I mean is that the evil third eye was something they just could have bought from a store. Like I didn't like that. I really didn't like that. That tells you that because then there could be infinite of these things. If you can buy one, you could buy another one, then you could probably make them. So if you can manufacture these things, then why wouldn't you manufacture them? If I remember correctly, this was also an idea that was in Yu Yu Hakusho, where Hiei had an artificial third eye implanted into his head, which I thought was fucking cool, and that's what I was thinking about when it was introduced in Dragon Ball. And I was like, oh, okay, so it's very Dragon Ball-ish, like he has to actually pop it into his head. That he was gonna have like some kind of magical ritual to put the thing in his head. And that would have been fine. Or it could have been like a transformation for Demon Kings where they grow a third eye or something. For it to be an actual item that they have to go out and find, I'm cool with that too. And them, saying that the evil third eye, you got to hit him in the back of the head 3 times is kind of gimmicky, and it actually plays into Dragon Ball Superhero, where you had to hit Cell right or the Cell Max at the top of the head. I thought that was kind of goofy, giving them weak spots. Like these never been villains in Dragon Ball with weak spots before until now. Like now, Toriyama is obsessed with giving villains weak spots. But it was fine, and so I like the item. I did not like that Gloria was just able to crush it and for it to go away, and I did not like that there were other ones because it kind of cheapens it. Now they can just destroy those and prevent any future stories with the evil third eye. Maybe you could say that those are false evil third eyes, and there's a real one out there somewhere that makes them even more powerful. That could be the case. Or you're gonna have a bunch of fan fictioners drawing a bunch of characters with evil third eyes. So it's gonna be like the entire Dragon Ball Z crew with evil third eyes in their head, and Tien's gonna have 4 eyes. Like just ridiculous shit. But I love the idea. I thought the idea was great. So ultimately, I probably had more negatives than positives when it came to Dragon Ball Daima. Let's talk about the finish to the show, though. So Goma, he loses the third eye because Majin Ku, the weak Majin that was created from Majin Buu, hit him in the back of the head 3 times with a book, and the eyeball popped out. And then Glorio stepped on the eyeball, and then Goma was captured by Yarinsu, and him and Degisu were confined to a glass jar for 99 years, which means nothing because they're immortal, right? Doesn't mean anything because they're immortal. But they're in there playing video games, which I thought was fun. Like it's not literal hell. That's also part of Dragon Ball being more childlike. Is that even the punishments aren't really even punishments? They get to play video games all day for 99 years. Like that's really weird, man. And then Majin Ku is made the Demon King because he was the one who defeated Goma, even though it was, Goku who did the most of the work. And then he makes everybody a minister. He gives everybody power, and basically it becomes almost like a monarchical republic because you have a king, but he gives power to all these other people. And Glorio and Arinsu and all just get power. Okay. So I didn't hate Majin Ku. I thought he was a cool character. I just think there was a waste of time that they spent making us think like this guy's going to be something special. He ended up being more intellectual than physically powerful. And then, of course, with Dude, they went with the fat, dumb stereotype. I would have liked for these guys to have been fused together, which I thought that was the point of the join bug, is that they were going to end up having to fuse. But they didn't do that either. But so Majin Buu being the Demon King was fun. He's not a bad character. He's actually kind of, I don't want to use it. I hate to use the word cute, but that's the word that fits. Is that he's very cute. He's a cute little kid, man. He's like a little kid character too. You know, where he's very much out to please people, specifically Arinsu, who is his mommy. So you know, I dig it. You know, I think it was fun. Um, them leaving the demon world as an open space that they can go back to later, or that stories can come from later, is fun too. The finish also kind of implied that Pansy goes with the gang, which I don't. mm, What are they gonna do with that? Like, what's that? Um, it might be a little weird. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if Pansy doesn't end up being the love interest for Goten. You know, even though she's like 90 years old or something. WG Phil says, I think the next super chapter could implement Daima to explain Daima plot holes. I do believe that will be the attempt. That will be the attempt. The issue here will be that there is no Toriyama involvement anymore. So what are they going to do? All right, without making more potholes, you know. Um, so I would imagine they're going to try to make everything make sense once Super gets to it. Once Super starts to really get rolling, and you now have to do something with the Black Frieza, and you have to do something with the Galactic Patrol guys, and all this kind of stuff. All that shit has to be folded in. You have to now explain Super Saiyan 4, Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. Oh, you can, I don't even need to do Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. You can just forget it and just say it's there. It's always been there. I think it's already been introduced in the manga anyway. Just like Red Vegeta wasn't introduced in the anime or anything like that. It came uh, already in the. It came later in the manga. So you could really don't need to go into Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta. You can really just kind of wash that away. But then of course there's Super Saiyan 5 4 Vegeta. So that's going to be something that's going to have to introduce in the manga chapter. Um, but I'm interested in what they're going to do with the Tamagamis, Dooku, Arinsu, all these characters. Is Goma going to make a return? They've in recent years have these Dragon Ball characters not kill villains. So now these villains are still hanging around, like the guy from Super, the guy who made Cell Max and made the superhero cyborgs. That guy's still around, and from the Super side. So that ought to be interesting to see where they go with that. Um, WG feels that, do you think Goma dressing up as Jiren as a Toriyama gag would lead to something, since a demon did destroy his home planet? It's entirely possible they could find some way to sneak that in. Um, to tell you the truth, Goma needs some feats. He need, outside of getting the third eye, he need a feat. He needs to actually accomplish something. And part of the problem was that he never accomplished anything in the story, which made him pretty much a weak villain. AJ3 says, I imagine they add the Tuffles baby for season 2. What about Broly? I don't know if they'll actually do a season 2. If they do a season 2, they should basically what they should do really is, since Super is already up and running, just fold things from Daima into Super. That's all you really need to do. And then you could just have a lot of these characters separated. Like, instead of having all these god powers for everybody, have Broly go towards the more physical side of the Saiyans, where he becomes like a Super Saiyan 4 sort of character. And he doesn't actually get God Ki and all that kind of stuff, because it makes him different, to make these characters stand out a little bit more. Oh, this shit's gonna go longer than I thought, because it's already 40 minutes in. But so overall, I think Diamond was beautiful. I think the plot holes and the plot was too slow, and there was too many plot holes. But overall, I think it really scored when it came to fan service. Giving people Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta, Super Saiyan 4 Goku, fights were great. But I can't overcome the fact that Goma, I didn't care about him as a villain. When you have Zamasu being the only major villain within the last 15 years or whatever that had any sort of malice, then it's hard to build an entire franchise around a guy that doesn't do anything that evil, but he's supposed to be the bad guy. Like, that's weird. All right, I'm about to spend probably 10 minutes on Freerin, and then we're gonna get ready for Elimination Chamber. All right, so I watched Freerin Beyond Journey's End. It looked boring for when I first heard about it, but then people said that it was a fascist cartoon. And I was like, fascist? Last time I heard people say something was fascist, it was Goblin Slayer, right? And Goblin Slayer ended up being fucking lit. So I was like, I'm about to go watch this. I watched the first 2 episodes and was like, you know what? I'm not feeling it. It's kind of boring. But I kept watching it, and you know what? It won me over. Freerin is a sort of dreary character where she's not loud and bombastic, not a typical um, shonen protagonist, And I was really attracted to the series about the sweetness, the sentimentality of it. So for those of you who have never seen Freerin Beyond Journey's End, it actually starts at the series begins at the ending. Freerin and her team have defeated the evil Demon King, and the world is at peace. And now Freerin, who is an elf, she starts to just watch her human friends die. So Himmel the hero, who is a really big character to Freerin, you could almost say she's in love with him, kind of. And she learns so much about humans from him. She watched him grow old and die, essentially. So now she's dealing with the passage of time. As an elf, she's pretty much immortal. So for what is 10 to 15 years to her is not that much for a human being. That's pretty much their entire lifespan. So she would go around the world collecting magic and learning more about magic because that's her passion. And she would come into contact with one of her human friends who has aged a tremendous amount, and they're now old. And so now she's sort of the only. Well, I think the another character in the series is a dwarf, so he's still alive too, but he doesn't have an immortal lifespan like an elf does. But the two human characters, which was the priest and Himmel the hero, they both dead. They both died of old age. And she is the last hero walking around with the memory of their success. Oh shit, my dinner is here. But she's the last one walking around with memories of their success, and she's constantly um, reminded of that journey that she went through with her friends. And she's also continuing her journey because she's now being saddled with a new young human mage that she gets from the priest who was the white mage at her party. So she's basically like adopted this student who was a little girl when they met, and then out of nowhere, Freerin sees her as a teenager, and she's taller than she is, and she doesn't really. She's like, "Oh my god!" But the entirety of this thing is about the passage of time. Freerin dealing with the curse of immortality for the most part. It's not that she wants to die; it's that her living forever has a downside to it, and that is she's outliving all of her friends. And so she chooses not to get too tied up into human affairs because humans just die. And it actually does a good job of when they introduce the demon characters. The demons are manipulative. They mimic human emotions. They mimic human speech, and they're pure evil. They have no souls, right? They're demons. They're real demons. And this is what people say is fascistic about it because there's no gray area with the demons. Like they're all evil. But you're supposed to compare the elves and the demons because there's more than one elf in the series. Freerin is an elf, and then there's the leader elf. So she's like the leader of the Magic Society or something like that. But you see that both of them have problems with emotions. Like the demons are faking their emotions, while the elves have emotions. They're just blunted. Like they have the same emotional resonance as everybody else, but these are just blunted for her. And you get to see a good dichotomy there between the elves and the demons. Um, but I really got attached to the show due to Himo the Hero, the constant flashbacks of him showing her how things operate, the nuggets of advice, the nuggets of truth, and the perspective on the world that he is able to pass down to her and leave with her that I think is actually great. Um, to the point where the story doesn't matter that much, even though, yes, you're still watching these other young characters grow. Um, what really matters is Freeren's been down this road before, and we're watching her go through it all again. She's joining up on a whole new party. Now this party is getting older, so it's a constant cycle. And it's a really good show. I think everybody should watch Freeren. It's good. So that's it. My dinner is here. Um, Thank you guys for stopping by for this short amount of time. I might come back tomorrow, um, even though I really don't have anything to say. But let's finish up with Angie Stone. Yes, I saw that Angie Stone passed away in a car crash. I wasn't a huge fan of her music, even though I did hear that brother song that she wrote, which I thought was one of the most uplifting songs I ever heard when I was a young man. I love that song. I still do. But most of my stuff is I've heard her do features with I think she was on the Jazzmatazz Guru album. I'm pretty sure she was on one of those Robert Glasper albums. Was it her? Was it Angie Stone? I'm not sure. But I heard a lot about her features. That's pretty much where I know her from. But Roberta Flack is probably a bigger deal for me. Roberta Flack is a fucking phenom, bro. She Killing Me Softly, the song that Lauryn Hill covered, is originally a Roberta Flack song. Um, she did she was amazing. If you never listened to a Roberta Flack, you should really go and listen to Roberta Flack. But we lost some legends this week, man, and hopefully this gets some people to listen to older music. Listen to Roberta Flack and listen to Angie Stone, and get you some culture. All right, I'll talk to you guys later.